Hello, well, thank you, Amin. Very brief introduction to myself for the maybe one person that doesn't know who I am. I'm Heather Fletcher. I've lived in Greater Manchester for about 50 odd years. I was educated here, went to Birmingham University, did a law degree, spent 30 not very happy years in the legal profession, and the last 5 years I've been a local councillor, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, even though it's stressful. And as for the Muslim Jewish Forum, that completely changed my life. I met people that I'd never have connected with. Through the 130 events we've done, I think we've connected a lot of people, and it's given me great satisfaction. So this is our 131st event, and let's now go on to the substantive event. So the first person who will be speaking is David Berkley QC. Now, David Berkley was born in Haifa in Israel and educated at Manchester Jewish Grammar School. Thereafter, he obtained a law degree from Manchester University. He was called to the bar in 1979, was appointed a QC in 1999, a district judge in 2000, and a civil recorder in 2001. David's been representing clients in business disputes for more than 30 years, and he has a substantial practice across the UK. He deals with disputes in commercial litigation, banking, and employment. He's also dealt with complex legal disputes in the entertainment industry, and he's acted for the Stone Roses and Gary Barlow. David's been head of his chambers in London since 2019. In the Legal 500 Book of Recommendations, it states he is calm, collected, and measured barrister and is an excellent orator. He has a long-held, strong interest in interfaith dialogue, regularly does presentations with Amin, and he's helped to draft the forum's constitution, and he's a current member of our executive committee. And he is going to do the serious part of the evening, which is tell you about the festival of Purim. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Heather. I assume you can all see me. And also, Purim Sameach, happy Purim to everybody, one and all. It's great to see so many familiar faces, some unfamiliar faces, and you're all very welcome to share in this festival of Purim. So let me now just share the screen with you, and let's discuss in the short time that I've got available something about Purim, what it is, what it represents, and why it's a unique festival in many respects within the Jewish calendar. I'll just change my view now to slideshow. So can you all see the screen? Great. So you'll see that today was the 16th of Adar. That's a Hebrew calendar date, the 16th of the month of Adar. Yesterday was the 15th of Adar, which is technically the Purim day, although it fell on Saturday. So Purim has been celebrated over 3 days in the Jewish world. In Jerusalem today, they are celebrating Purim because of the vagaries of the calendar. That's how it works. Now, the story of Purim is recorded in a book which is part of the Hebrew Bible, and it is literally a scroll, the Scroll of Esther, one of the smaller books of the Hebrew Bible. And in fact, as you can see, the name of the book is named after the hero or heroine of the book, which is Queen Esther, Esther, who is one of the main protagonists after whom the book is named. In fact, the Hebrew Bible contains other books in which female characters are major characters. There's another book, at least, which will be familiar to you, which is named after the principal character, who is a woman, and that is the book of Ruth. So the story we're concerned with here is the story of Esther and Mordechai, which takes place not in Israel, not in Egypt, but where? In Persia, in what is today modern Iran. So let me try to give you some of the background to this amazing story. So we'll be looking at the scroll. That's what we're dealing with. And part of the tradition of the festival is to read that scroll. And everybody has an obligation to read the scroll. Here's my copy of the scroll. It's handwritten, like all these scrolls are, on parchment in Hebrew, and it's read with a particular tune that is specific to the festival of Purim. Because of the significance of Purim, calligraphers and Hebrew scribes have excelled in writing scrolls specifically for Purim. We can see an example there of a medieval scroll, and here's one from the 19th century, which is in the Jewish Museum in London, and most Jewish museums will have many of these types of scrolls. Now, let me show you something that may be of interest to you, and that is, here is what it sounds like to hear the Megillah read. And the person reading this was on Friday. My 10-year-old granddaughter is reading the scroll of Esther as part of her lessons, Hebrew lessons, over Zoom, because this year, obviously, that's how it's been done. And she's doing it for a Hebrew class. So you'll hear her teacher first, and you'll hear a little bit of the reading of the Megillah. So let me play that for you in a moment. Here we go.
Moving on to chapter 2, and Amelie, let's start chapter 2.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of what it sounds like. Okay, well, what can I tell you about the actual history of this? So the story is set in the royal city of Shushan, Susa, in Persia, where King Ahasuerus, that is Xerxes I, the son of Darius, he rules over a vast empire. And we're told right at the beginning of the story, the beginning of the scroll, that his empire ranges from India in the east to Ethiopia in the west. 127 kingdoms are incorporated within his empire. And yes, Afzal, India, and therefore unpartitioned Pakistan, does appear in the Hebrew Bible. And in the Bible, it is called Hodu. Hodu is the name in Hebrew of India, and that appears in the very first verse of the book of Esther. And the story is an unusual one because it has lots of romance, it has drama, and it has lots of humor. We're dealing with a foolish king, a beautiful young queen called Esther, a wicked politician with genocidal intent called Haman. And as the story tells us, his plans are, like many anti-Semites that follow him, is to kill and annihilate all the Jews in the empire, young and old, woman and child, on one single day. And that day is to be the 15th of Adar, which we're celebrating now as Purim, because by a series of coincidences and good fortune, this wicked politician, Haman, descends during the course of a series of events to the level of almost a music hall villain. If you've seen Bertolt Brecht's Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui, it's similar like that. He becomes an absurd character. So to put it into its perspective, into its historical perspective, it follows the destruction of the King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar in the year 586 before the Common Era. So that's a long time ago. And the Jewish community were exiled from Israel and become dispersed in the Near East, particularly in the area of modern-day Iraq and Iran. The Purim story itself takes place in the 4th century BCE, at which time the Persians have extended their empire right across the entire region, and the Jews, therefore, are a significant minority. So more than 2,000 years ago, Haman encourages the king to kill the Jews using an all too familiar trope that they are somehow separate, they have different laws, and the foolish king is taken in and is willing to sign off the proclamation the Jews will be massacred on the 15th of the month of Adar. Now, unbeknownst to Haman, and indeed to the king himself, his beautiful young queen is herself Jewish, a fact that until then she is concealed from the royal court. And she'd become queen following a beauty contest, which her older cousin Mordechai had encouraged her to enter, and she'd won that. And so she had become the queen. And Queen Esther, in the course of this story, with the encouragement of her cousin Mordechai, who was always looking after her in the background, she takes the point, this is the central point of the story. She has the courage to reveal her identity to the king. And then in a series of coincidences and indeed some farce, including bedroom antics, Haman is disgraced, the king's edict is reversed, and Haman and his followers are duly punished. And the book of Esther tells us that this story of reversal from near tragedy to triumph was marked then throughout the empire on the 15th of Adar by all sorts of celebrations which we continue today through the millennia and which are performed effectively in the same way today. So let me come back to the screen and let's look at, so let's go to the next. So here's some interesting facts about the book of Esther. God isn't mentioned once in the book of Esther. It's a story that everybody can relate to. And one of the reasons it's very popular, even in the wider community, in the community of people who are secular Jews and in the state of Israel, which is not a religious state, is because it has this universal appeal. All the action in the book takes place in the Persian Empire. It doesn't take place in Israel or in the Holy Land. There are no overt miracles. What happens is chance, coincidence. And the name itself of the festival, Purim, means lots, like in chance, lots, like in raffles, because that's how the 15th of Adar came to be chosen, by drawing lots. And it's this, and one of the themes, the motifs of the book is the idea of chance. And this will surprise you. The rabbis encourage people to drink on Purim. I know our Muslim friends will find that a bit odd, and I'm not encouraging it at excess, but intoxication is part of the customs of the day, so that according to the Mishnaic period in the 2nd to the 4th century, intoxication said you couldn't differentiate between the wicked Haman and the righteous Mordechai. That's the level of intoxication one is supposed to achieve. Now, here's an interesting fact. In the synagogue, when the reading of the Megillah takes place, in order to show how much we disapprove of Haman, every time Haman's name appears in the text, everybody, and the children in particular, are encouraged to make a noise like this. That noise is from a gragger, which is a noise-making machine. You can see there some early examples on the screen. I'll show you in a moment my own, which is itself an antique, but I'll show it to you in a moment. And here's a picture of another one of my granddaughters, this was taken on Thursday night in the synagogue, where she is in suitably socially distant form, listening to the Megillah, listening to the hearing of the scroll of Esther, and there she is with her own gragger making a noise. So the religious requirements of Purim are, first of all, to fast the day before Purim, because Esther herself instituted a fast contemporaneous with the story itself. There is the public reading of the Megillah, and this year I heard the Megillah over Zoom because I didn't want to attend the synagogue, although we were operating according to government guidelines. But there was a limited number of people allowed in the synagogue, so I and my wife listened to the Megillah over Zoom. There's also a tradition to give gifts on Purim, and these are gifts which can be used on the day. So these tend to be foods that have been prepared and ready to be eaten and drunk on the day itself. There's also a requirement to give charity to the poor, which has to be handed to the poor on the day. And there are ways in which we can get them to poor people. And these days, there are apps that allow us to do that, believe it or not. And there was also the tradition of holding a festive meal with family and friends on the day of Purim. And again, this has been very much curtailed this year because of COVID. So here's an example of one of the requirements to give prepared foods. So here's a gift set that we received from people.
David, are you meant to be screen sharing at the moment? Because at the moment you turned off the screen sharing when you were.
I'm sorry. I thought I don't know which stage you lost me, but let me just go back to the screen sharing then, and we may. Do you mind if I just rapidly go through this? I'm sorry. I didn't realize we may just. All right. So I didn't appreciate that you. So this is probably after you heard Amelie reading the Megillah, I think, didn't you?
Yes, we did.
Right. Okay. So did you see that? This is making a noise in the synagogue.
No, we didn't.
Okay. So let me put that. Sorry about that. Let me put that on the screen, and let me change the view to slideshow. Yes. So here's the 1 moment. Right. So here's the noise making machine, and that's my granddaughter using her own noise making machine, a gragger, during the reading of the Megillah. So every time the name Haman appears, we make that noise using the gragger, which we'll see in a moment. Then we've got the mishloach manot, giving prepared foods that can be eaten on the day as gifts. Here's an example of that. And here's an example of a granddaughter of mine standing outside her house so passers-by can take food off her table. And please help yourself. That's part of the tradition of giving on Purim. Okay. Then there's certain customs of Purim. Obviously, you'll see from tonight, one of the customs is fancy dress. People are encouraged to dress in fancy dress. There's also the tradition of the Purim spiel. Spiel means play, and spielers are the players. And most years, this year it's been very muted because of COVID, the streets are full of people wandering around, wandering minstrels and players and troubadours. There's that carnival atmosphere. It's sort of, it's very difficult to describe. I'll show you perhaps in a moment a video showing what it was like a couple of years ago before the COVID. We also have certain foods, and I think we're going to get a recipe for hamantash, and that's one of the foods you can see on the screen, which is associated with Purim. And there are parades in Israel. There are parades organized by the local municipalities as well. It becomes sort of Mardi Gras meets Notting Hill. And we have comedy. Purim Torah is part of the comedy. And this goes back, even the most religious people get involved in this. You get rabbis who are used to giving very esoteric sermons, make nonsense sermons on Purim. They're usually already intoxicated, but they stand up and they tell complicated pieces of what is really exegesis, which is false, just to make a laugh, to give people part of the comedy. It is really an extraordinary day in the context of the religious community itself. Fancy dress, here's examples of some grandchildren in Israel, my grandchildren on Friday, and one of my grandchildren in Manchester. I just want to show you something. I hope this works. This is what Purim gives you a flavor of what it looks like in pre-COVID times. So this was from 2017. I hope it'll come up on the screen. You can see it now.
I never had the strength to take it out.
It's an audio in the back of a hire van. What is going on?
You need to switch the window that you're sharing manually.
Okay, I don't know if you saw any of that. I'm not sure.
No, we didn't see anything.
Okay, all right. Well, you heard of it. So, okay, this hasn't quite worked for me in terms of the technology. And I don't want to take any more time because I know you've got a lot. There's a big program tonight. But what we've had to do this year is it's been extremely muted. And I know we're going to hear some klezmer music soon, so I'm not going to, normally we have lots of floats in the street and people playing music. This year, the musicians haven't been able to do as much in public, but what they have been able to do is produce some CDs, particularly to distribute free around the area, so we can listen to music in our own homes. And one final thing, if I may, before we finish. I wanted to emphasize that Purim has a particular historical significance. It happens in a particular place, and it happens in Iran. And today, and I think this is really part of the continuing relationship that we have with the Muslim world. You probably are aware of the fact that there are significant strides taking place to normalize relations with various countries. Iran is a very complex country in terms of its relationship with Jews and in Israel. And I just want to point out that what you're seeing on the screen now is the mausoleum in Hamadan in Iran, which is traditionally associated with the burial place of Queen Esther and her cousin Mordechai that we've been talking about. So I would hope that one day we can have Purim in Hamadan, and we can all have, as part of the Muslim Jewish Forum, a visit there in order to be able to combine tourism with what we've achieved so far, which is this great dialogue between our communities. Now, I want to stop sharing the screen now. I just want to finish off, if I may, just by showing you three things. And one is, as I said before, this is my own personal Megillah. It was handwritten by a scribe who I commissioned to write it. Everybody tries to have their own. And so I'm able to read directly from there. I also mentioned the noise-making machine. Well, here's mine. And again, I'll try and share the screen with you. But this is a Russian one, 19th century. And so this, again, is one of my objects, religious objects, which I treasure. And then here is a CD that was produced by a local musician. And although you can't read it, it says in Yiddish, Purim in Manchester. And it gives this year. So this musician called Avromi Samet, who would have been on the streets of Manchester over this weekend, wasn't able to do that because of COVID. So he produced a CD and he had it delivered to people's homes. So there we go. That's an example of how we've made do over this remarkable period. And here's a small introduction, a short introduction to this extraordinary festival of Purim. And in the tradition of Purim, I'm going to raise a glass and wish you all Purim Sameach, Happy Purim. So this is Purim in Manchester, 2017. I just wanted to show you this, that people who weren't aware what goes on in the ultra-Orthodox community in Manchester, because I think quite a few people made references to this, but it's quite useful to just see what the streets are like. So let me just show you this. I'm going to share the screen with you, and let's see if it works, okay?
The link was through my Facebook.
I never had the strength to take it higher.
Shut up! No. You've got Martin Audio in the back of a hire van. What is going on? Yeah!
I need to go out next. We'll take Elodie.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. You get an idea, don't you?
Yep.
Gosh.
You get an idea. And these are the people who, as somebody pointed out previously, the rest of the year they're completely sober. They wear completely different clothes, and they're completely. I mean, this is just the one. Their 24 hours are just going mad for a period of time. So yes. And of course, this year it's all been rather muted because of COVID. So we've not had this same sort of street carnival festival atmosphere. As I said, Notting Hill meets sort of, I don't know, the Mardi Gras.